everyone, a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, depending on where you're joining from. My name is Anand, and I welcome you to the today's ITIL for Foundation webinar. To give you a brief about myself, I have overall 12 plus years of experience. I'm a certified ITIL V3 expert and an ITIL 4 managing professional. Currently, I'm working as a freelance trainer and a consultant. And in the past, I've worked as change manager, release manager, and an IT consultant. So that's a very brief introduction about me. So during this session, you may have questions. So you can use the question functionality or the chat functionality throughout the session to ask your questions. We'll be taking these questions at the end of the session. Okay. So I'll talk about ITL, what ITL is all about, and in the end, we'll take all your questions. So let me start about talking about what ITL is. So ITL, when we say, it's basically a collection of best practices. It's a set of guidelines and recommendations, and it is a framework. Now, don't worry if you don't understand what all of these mean right now. I'll talk about these one by one. Let's talk about best practices first. When we talk about best practices, let's have a look at this slide. This slide is giving us an insight into some of the best practices in Agile. Let's move on. We have a look at this slide which talks about certain Six Sigma principles. And then we have DevOps practices. So what I'm trying to show here is basically that there are so many best practices in various different domains. If I go back, we had best practices in Agile, in Six Sigma, and DevOps, and so many more. These are just some examples. Now, ITL is a collection of so many best practices. That means the best of the industry has come together in a framework that is called as ITIL. Okay. So similarly, we have best practices outside of IT as well, because some of the participants in today's session would be outside of IT and they are interested in knowing how ITL can help them. So let me tell you this, that ITL is not limited to IT. These best practices have come from various different domains, various different industries, finance, banking, healthcare, you name it. Every industry's best practices have been collated into ITIL. Okay. And anyways, this is one of the common questions that we get, in these webinars and in trainings as well. So I am not in IT department or I am not in IT company. How will ITL help me? Okay. So I asked people, what do you mean you're outside of IT? See, if you're into a bank, even in a bank, there are systems, the infrastructure or backend is still IT. You're in a finance company. How do they run all the numbers? Again, IT supports them. You are in an insurance company, car manufacturer, whatever business you are in, whatever company you are in, everything is supported by IT, right? Today, there is nothing that is not supported by IT. As long as there is IT, there will be ITIL. That's how basic these concepts are. Okay. So to summarize, these best practices have been widely accepted. So ITIL is a widely accepted framework. They provide a proven outcome. If you're using ITL in your organization or as an individual, you will get the results that have been proven time and time again by many organizations. And as I said, it's not at all specific to IT. There are some concepts which are specific to IT, but a lot of the concepts are pretty generic in nature that can be applied to any industry, any field, irrespective of what role you are in. Next, let's talk about guidelines. We say ITL is a set of guidelines. Have a look at this picture, which talks about COVID-19 guidelines. Avoid close contact, avoid touching. If you look at all of these look like more recommendations than rules, right? None of them look like rules. If we go to this slide, these guidelines are more like rules. Report 2 hours, mask, gloves compulsory, so on and so forth. Why I'm trying to say this is guidelines can be very strict, that is, they can be implemented like rules, or guidelines can be implemented very loosely. ITL is a set of guidelines that are implemented loosely. What do I mean by this? See, if you want to implement ITIL, you don't have to follow everything that ITL talks about, either as an individual or as an organization. As I said, ITL is not at all a set of rules. See, when we have rules, The only option is we follow them. If you don't follow them, we get penalized. When we talk about standards, right, there are various standards like ISO standard and so on and so forth. They are more rules. In a standard, any ISO standard, if you miss out on one aspect of that standard, you will not get the certification. ITL is not like that. Okay. So ITL is a set of guidelines or recommendations. So to summarize, guidelines or recommendations, implementation can vary from being loosely implemented to strict enforcement. In ITL's case, they are implemented loosely. And bear in mind, this is why ITL has been so successful, because every organization has different needs, every role has different needs. If ITL provided a strict guidance that has to be followed by every organization, not every organization will be able to adopt and adapt according to it. So this is the beauty of ITIL. Next, we say ITIL is a framework. What do I mean by a framework? See, all of us have seen constructions of building happening. When construction of a building happens, what is the thing that you see? First, they lay down the foundation and build the framework. Afterwards, the rest of the construction work starts. I know very well because there's so many buildings being constructed around my house that it's noisy all the time. Anyways, back to the point. The frameworks can be of different nature or different structure, but essentially they all do the same thing. They provide structure and strength to whatever that is being built. So similarly, ITL is a framework. When I say ITL is a framework, that means ITL will help you build the fundamental structure on which your organization will run. Okay. This is the strength that is required. No, it doesn't matter what role you're in, what kind of an organization you're working for, whether it has 5 employees or 5 million employees, it doesn't matter. Every organization needs a structure to work with, right? ITL helps you provide that. So, to summarize, ITL helps you provide with a skeleton structure or a framework. Now, what this means ITL will not give you step-by-step guidelines. It will give you how to build the framework. So if you're talking about change, incident, problem, whatever processes that are running in your organization, ITL will help you with the basic concepts, how to build the basics of your processes. It will not tell you step by step how you should, customize and all those things, because every organization is free to customize as per their own need. Now, ITL may look incomplete because if I go back, this does not look like a complete picture, right? But tell me, can you construct a building without this? The answer is no. So similarly is ITIL. It looks incomplete, but it is very, very essential. Whatever you want to do, ITIL will provide the foundation and the basis. Now, frameworks can be flexible or rigid in nature, right? ITIL is a flexible framework. So these are the three things. ITIL is a set of guidelines, recommendations, framework, and a collection of best practices. Another thing to note about ITIL is it is vendor neutral. When I say vendor neutral, that means it doesn't matter what kind of a service provider you are, whether you are into network services, cloud-based services, you are into development, ITIL principles apply everywhere. ITIL is also non-prescriptive in nature. When I say non-prescriptive, what that means is, see, if you go to a chemist, if you go to a doctor, what does he give you? He gives you a prescription. You take that prescription, go to the chemist, he gives you the same medicine. This is the nature of a prescription. You cannot change it, right? So ITL is non-prescriptive. That means you can change and customize it according to your needs. ITL will never tell you follow this and this only. There is no hard and fast rules in ITL, which is the beauty of it. ITL is not a standard, as we have discussed, neither is it a project management framework. But this does not mean, so when I say ITL is not a project management framework, that means it will not help you step by step on how to run your projects. There are frameworks like PMP or Prince2 that talk about project management. But does that mean if I am in project management, ITL is not applicable to me? No, ITL is definitely applicable to you, because even though you're into project management, you're still dealing with various different teams. You need to know how they work, all those things. ITL will definitely help you, right? We are only saying ITIL is not a project management framework. Now, why do we need ITIL? Why do individuals need ITIL or organizations need ITIL? First of all, ITIL is being used by hundreds and thousands of companies globally. There are millions of people who are certified in ITIL. So it is definitely not something new. It started 30 years back. Okay, ITL started in early 1980s in the UK, and it's been 30 plus years of evolution and customization in ITIL. So it's definitely not new, and there are millions of people who are certified in ITIL. So, and when we talk about the industry itself, today, if you go to apply for any role, whether it is the role of an engineer or that of a manager or senior manager, one of the things you would see is they're talking about requirement of ITIL. Why this is so is because ITIL provides you with the basic fundamentals that is needed for every job. Most organizations prefer if you are ITIL certified. Okay, but why organizations are asking? See, one thing is that our services are becoming more and more complex. 5 years back, the kind of services that we were providing were very simple. There was development work, there was simple infrastructure support, a little bit of service desk incident management, and it was okay to manage it. Now we have big data, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, so many things coming in that it becomes really difficult for any organization to manage all this. ITL helps you in managing your services better. Another thing that you would have seen is it doesn't matter again what role you are in. One thing is constantly business is changing, constant changes. See, change is the nature of the world we are living in, right? If you're using your phones every 6 months, you change. Yeah, if you use a car every few years, you change. IT is itself is changing at a rapid pace. Any other business is changing at a rapid pace. Constantly changes, constant upgrades. How do businesses deal with these upgrades? How do businesses deal with these constantly changing business requirements? ITL again helps you with that. Another thing is the client expectations never match the budget, right? All of us have seen this. Client expectations are sky high, their budget is bottom prices, right? So again, by managing your services better, you can bridge that gap. I'm not saying you can completely eliminate that gap, but definitely you can bridge that gap by managing your services better, bringing down the cost, and trying to keep up with the client expectations. So the current version we are talking about is ITIL 4. As I said, ITIL has been around 30 plus years. The previous version was ITIL V3. Some of you may already be certified in ITIL V3. In ITIL V3 came in 2011. ITIL 4 came last year, 2019. This is the latest version. After a gap of 8 years, we released ITIL 4. Why did we release ITIL 4? What was wrong with ITIL V3? All these are questions. See, V3, nothing was wrong, but it's just that in these 8 years, 8 long years, lot has evolved in the industry. If you know anything about IT or any other industry, 8 years is a big time for things to evolve, definitely, right? In last 8 years, new things have come, cloud computing, agile, DevOps, so many things. ITIL V3 was slowly becoming irrelevant. That's why ITIL 4. I'm going to talk about very briefly the differences between ITIL V3 and ITIL 4, applicable for people mostly who have done ITIL V3, but rest of the people as well, because it gives you an insight on what can you expect if you decide to go ahead with this ITIL 4 certification. First of all, let me tell you, the demand for ITIL 4 is going sky high, right? Right now, every organization, individuals, even those who have done V3 are rushing to upgrade to ITIL 4. Why it is? One of the things is people who have done V3, there was something called as a service life cycle. So you had service strategy, service design, transition, service operation, and then continuous service improvement. All of this is gone now. It has changed into something called as a service value system. What the service value system is, I cannot talk about very briefly because this is a completely new concept. Um, but this service value system basically looks at a holistic approach, focuses on end-to-end delivery of value. These life cycle had a siloed approach. So if you're into, let's say, transition activities, you only had to know about transition. If you're into operations, that's the only thing you need to know. So one thing that you would have noticed happening in the industry right now is the roles are getting combined. Organizations are expecting you to be multidisciplinary. What I mean by that is, see, 5 years back, if you're a developer, if you knew only development, good enough. Now we are talking about DevOps, which is a combination of development and operations. Similarly, if you were only an incident manager 5 years back, okay. Now organizations are saying incident and problem management. Like that, roles, designations, many things are getting combined. Okay. So organizations are definitely expecting individuals and everyone to look at a larger picture. It's not whatever role you might be in. You may be in service desk, you may be in incident management, you may be a project manager. Still, you need to at least have a high level overview of what others do. You can no longer sit in your cubicle and say, hey, my role is only project management. I'm a project manager, or I'm an incident manager, or whatever role you are in. This will not help you. You need to have a better understanding of what other teams are doing. Okay, this is very essential for survival as an individual as well, and for organizations to survive. Because if we look at an organization, it is a combination of various different parts, right? One part is project management, one is service desk, one is incident, one is problem. All of them come together to deliver value to the customers. No one can do it alone, right? So this collaboration and all of this has come because of agile. Again, I don't want to get into too much detail of it, but this is the major change between ITIL v3 and ITIL 4. ITIL 4 focuses more on end-to-end delivery of services. In ITIL v3, we had 26 processes. In ITIL 4, we have something called as practices. Here, the focus mostly was on just the customer. In ITIL 4, we are focusing on all the stakeholders. How do we create value for all our stakeholders? In ITIL v3, it was aligned with waterfall project management. ITIL 4 is aligned with concepts such as Agile, DevOps, and Lean. So very briefly, these are some of the changes. There are many more changes, but I don't want to get into too much detail. We had 26 processes, now we have 34 practices. We had 9 principles in V3, now we have 7 guiding principles in ITIL 4. Many changes. I'm not going to talk too much about the changes. Definitely there are changes. I would say 60% of V3 remains, but 40% is completely new. So people who have done V3, if you have a question, should I be doing ITIL 4? Definitely. If you want to stay relevant, make this jump. Okay. So this is the service value system. This is something that people who have done with ITIL v3 would be familiar with. The rest of you can ignore for a moment. This is the new ITIL service value system. As you look at it, this talks about how different components, come together to create value. So this is definitely more end-to-end and holistic view as compared to the life cycle. So this is the major change. I'm just going to give few seconds for people to have a look at this if they want to just see what the service value system is. And any questions that are coming, we'll be taking them, as I said, at the end. So please bear with us. In terms of practices, as I said, there are 34 practices in ITIL 4. In the foundation, all 34 are not covered and 15 practices are covered. So again, I'll give you maybe a few seconds or 30 seconds to have a look at what practices are covered in ITIL 4. So there is IT security, relationship management, supplier management, IT asset management, monitoring and event management, release management, service configuration management, deployment management, continual improvement, change control, incident, problem, service requests, service desk, and service level. Now, one of the first questions that comes to people's mind is, okay, I'm a developer, let's say. None of these practices are relevant to me. Why do I need ITIL? This is people again are thinking from that old thinking perspective that I am a developer, I only need to know about development. Well, I have bad news for you. If that's going to be your attitude, it will be very difficult for you to survive. I'm not trying to scare here or anything. It's the reality. See, let's say you're a developer. Don't you still deal with incident management? Yeah, you're writing code, there is some issue with that. Which process or practice comes into picture? Incident management. You're a developer, and don't you deal with service desk? Yeah, you call service desk. Shouldn't you know about what service desk is all about? Don't you have to follow IT security policies? Shouldn't you be aware about IT security policies? So like that, we can look at every role. Every role is connected. All the practices in ITL is connected. So it doesn't matter what role you might be in. This is irrelevant. Okay. So people ask this, I am not in this role. Why do I need ITIL? As I said, it's irrelevant. All roles interact with each other. These are best practices, right? If you do not know these best practices, it will be very difficult for you to communicate with it. See, ITIL uses particular terminologies and definitions. Okay, let's say you had to interact with that particular team. If you do not know their language, will you be able to communicate with them? The answer is no, right? So you at least do the foundation and have the basic understanding of what those definitions and terminologies are, how to interact. We'll move on. These practices are covered in depth in foundation. See, in ITIL V3, 26 processes were discussed in detail. And one of the feedback that people used to give is it's too much to take in just one training. And this is not for we are talking at global level. This feedback was given. So ITL has taken cognizance of this fact and reduce the burden for participants and to enable them to focus on few practices more rather than everything. So these 7 practices we discussed in detail. The rest 8 out of the 15 we discuss at a very high level, so you get a basic understanding. Now, where do I get to know if I want to know all these 34? Well, there are various levels of certifications which you can do. We talk about this when you come for foundation, because anyways, foundation is the prerequisite. Now, let me talk about certification scheme of ITIL. So let me see if I can zoom in a little bit on this. Not sure if this is visible to everyone. Is it okay? Yeah. So in this is on the right hand side, you see the ITIL 4. So the foundation pretty much remains the same. We had foundation for V3. Here you have foundation for ITIL 4. In both the cases, you have to do foundation. Now here you had life cycle modules, strategy, design, transition, operation, CSI, and then capability modules. As you can see, this is different in ITIL 4. We have create, deliver, and support. This is, again, as you can see, this is not focusing on a particular role. When we say create, deliver, and support, we are talking about creating, delivering, and supporting value. We are saying focuses on value in ITIL 4. So it doesn't matter what role you're in, again, developer, project manager, incident manager, change manager, all of us have to create, deliver, and support. So this particular certification, after you do foundation, you can do. If you want to focus on how do I create value for my stakeholders, how do I deliver, how do I support, more applicable for people who are in operations, but for everyone else as well. Drive stakeholder value. For people who are actively engaged with multiple different stakeholders, you have to manage your internal teams, you have to manage your external suppliers, your customers, how to drive value across all these stakeholders. This particular certification talks about that. Then high velocity IT. As every organization is moving towards a fast paced environment and adopt agile DevOps, it will become more and more important for everyone in the organization to have an understanding, how can I drive my business faster, how can I deliver faster, something faster to my business. So high velocity IT talks about those concepts. There is nothing without improvement. So direct plan and improve talks about CI, or continuous improvement. How do I drive continuous improvement in my organization? So let me erase some of this so that it doesn't become too confusing. So once you do all of these 4, you become eligible for ITL managing professional. This is the equivalent of ITL expert that we had in V3. So we don't call it expert in ITIL 4, we simply call it managing professional. Now, bear in mind all of these certifications, if you want to do, the basic requirement is you should have completed the foundation and you should be certified. So these are part of managing professional. If you're into leadership roles, then you have an ITL leader certification, which you can do, focus only on the leadership. So these are different verticals. It's not necessary for you to do all of them. Once you have done foundation, it's up to you. Whichever certification you can choose, you can do it in whatever order. Let's say you have done ITIL strategist, you don't need to do it again for ITIL strategic leader. Once you do it, it's applicable for both these verticals. So now, some questions some of people mind with, okay, I'm an ITIL expert, or I have done ITIL foundation V3. What do I do in ITIL 4? Just give me a moment. Let me erase some of this. Otherwise, it's becoming, yeah, it's better now. It's becoming too messy. So if you had done ITIL V3 foundation alone, you need to, and you want to move on to ITIL 4. There is no other option. You have to do the ITIL 4 foundation again. Is it mandatory? No, not mandatory. It's a choice. If you want to be, it's like this. A new phone has come in the market. Is it mandatory for me to upgrade? No. If you see value in the new phone, you upgrade. That's it, right? If you want to stick to the old, you can stick to the old Nokia, whatever. Be happy with it. So it's not mandatory, but if you want to move to ITIL 4, you have to do the ITIL foundation again. Let's say you did one or two intermediate modules as well, and you want to jump to ITIL 4. Again, you have to start with foundation. But for people who had done, let's say, minimum of 5 intermediate modules, or they had 17 credits in ITIL V3, that is, either they were an ITIL expert, or they did 5 lifecycle module, or 3 or 4 capability modules. Either ways, if they had 17 credits, then you can skip the foundation, simply do one certification called ITIL Managing Professional Transition. Boom, you're here, ITIL Managing Professional. So these are the options to move from ITIL V3 to ITIL 4. I just want to take these few moments to close this session now, as we are reaching the closing time. So these sessions, I think I have given enough information about sessions, but if you have more questions, you can always write to us. Our email ID is support at, I think, no, sorry, just bear with me. There's a new email ID. This is the email ID you see on the slide, webinar@cognixia.com. There are contact details mentioned here, some of the other courses that Cognixia does. And you can reach out to us via these links. And you can also get your learning pass. There's something called as a learning pass that Cognixia provides. You can get more detail here. I'm not the right person to talk more about this, because my focus area is ITIL. We're still getting more questions. Okay, I think it would be best we address these questions later on, because there's no way I can answer all these questions right now. So many good questions coming in. I really want to thank all of you for participating in this webinar, asking so many questions, taking interest and trying to understand how ITIL can help you, take your career to the next level. My name is Anand. Once again, I want to thank all of you for joining this session, and I hope to see you in one of these trainings. I wish you all the best, and I hope you stay safe out there. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.